Having freed the water temple, our hero discovered that the gate barring the way to the temple gardens was now open to him. But also, after reloading the game, it spawned him back in Stoneheart City anyway. Hey everyone, Lieutenant Dan here. This is episode 4 of Blue Fire, so let's jump right in. So the game did spawn me back in the city, but that's okay. Especially now that I have a double jump to get around even easier. So I did some warm-up acrobatics, seeing if there was anywhere new for me to access, and there wasn't. And then I went back to Ari to buy a new cloak. I like how I switched to green after finishing the forest shrine, so this time I bought blue since I just beat the water temple. And I also bought light gray because it looked blue too. And I'm glad I did, because in person, blue looked almost the same as aqua, and light gray was actually the regular blue color. So I went with that. And now that I was broke, but at least actually blue, I wanted to backtrack into the sewers to see what I had missed. And check out this epic double jump wall grab clutch. Booyah! And after running around for a bit, I found what I was looking for. I had opened this path when I first came through here, but now I could actually go down it. I know some people don't enjoy having to backtrack in games, but I do like that Metroidvania style where you're teased with inaccessible routes that you have to come back to after you've progressed and gotten better at the game. Or theoretically gotten better at the game. Well, this route led me to a big empty room, and of course the gate closed behind me, and enemies appeared out of the shadow, and it was time to rumble. And I've definitely faced these enemies before, and knew to dodge their self-destruct attacks. But these big guys surprised me. The last time I fought them, I took them down easily, and I was even weaker then, but these guys had much more health than the ones I had fought before. So this fight took a lot longer than I expected. They did have the same self-destruct death, but I knew to watch out for that. And I was starting to get the hang of aerial attacks and maintaining my position above an enemy to land a long series of attacks. It took longer than expected, but I still clutched it out no problem. And with that, I got a special reward in a glowing chest. A whirlwind hook, which allowed me to charge up a spin attack that doubled as an extra jump. New movement mechanic unlocked. I'm about to become a spin master. So I left the sewers and went back to the city, where I stumbled on another book set, which meant I had enough to complete Mork's quest. And he gave me a very interesting reward, a new robe. This was the first outfit I got that wasn't just a recolor. It was a fresh look and even changed my hair and eyes. But ultimately I still liked my idea of repping the water temple, so I changed back and headed back to the city. I finally equipped that second spirit I got from the water temple, and then it was time to head back down the abandoned path. Now that I could double jump and charge a spin attack, I could easily cross these super long gaps, which felt good, even if the rewards were very standard. I was also getting into a good rhythm with these aerial attacks. Not that it always went perfect or anything. And I decided to test my new agility in a void course. This was a 3-star difficulty level called Fall of Death. Quite the foreboding name. And it featured some new challenges, like spike walls and giant circular columns. But I could charge a spin attack, which gave me an advantage. Although that advantage was kind of wasted if I didn't know where I was going. It's actually crazy that I almost salvaged that, but I learned from my mistakes, and it was now obvious that I was supposed to jump from column to column, which was totally doable, and I easily made it through. The columns are a bit of a fake out. It feels hard because you're not moving in a straight line, but especially with the super long stamina meter you get in the void, they're really not hard to navigate. Also, I was clearing these gaps with just my double jump and dash, which meant my spin attack really was just a bonus at this point. But it did give me a chance to recover if I really messed up, like here. That was not the intended way to do this part. And with 2 jumps, wall running tech, an extra spin if needed, and some mad skills, I made short work of this void course. Photo finish! And I had now earned my 12th heart. Back on the abandoned path, I think my void course prowess went to my head a little bit. But I did want to investigate the graveyard more. And watch this juggle. Oh yeah. I did a mega long jump to this gravesite and found a rose. And then I found this random elevator, but it needed to be fixed. And right across from the elevator, I found a family picture. And since this game is a lot like Legend of Zelda, I am assuming that all these trinkets are quest items I will need later. So I continued exploring, and embarrassing myself. This was a tricky jump around, but my instincts were right and it did lead somewhere. Specifically, it led to the lever which opened the gate so I could get back here more easily. Though looking around, I wasn't sure why I wanted to get back here at all. There didn't seem to be anything else in this room. But it's like I always say, when you hit a wall, awkwardly flail about, and then fall embarrassingly. So, after all that exploring, I desecrated a few more graves for money, took out my anger on this guy, and then it was finally time for me to go through the newly opened door to the temple gardens. Maybe I would see some pretty flowers. But instead of a garden, it took me to this random room. At least there were a bunch of pots for me to break open, and after lining my pockets, I opened the door to this supposed garden. But alas, there was not a single flower in sight. Just a cold, rainy courtyard filled with enemies. Oh well. And I gotta say, this was the first area where it really felt like the enemy difficulty ramped up significantly. I mean, this leech randomly jumped to his death, but consider this floating laser drone. He locked on and fired way faster than previous similar enemies, and he had a surprising amount of health. Plus, I was standing on this tiny platform, so falling from knockback or error was a real danger. This one got me sweating a little bit, and gave me a bad feeling about what might be coming next. And besides some casual platforming, what came next were these evil knights with swords. I had already faced several varieties of swordsmen, but these were the toughest yet by far. Partly because their attacks did over 1 heart of damage, and partly because they took so many hits to go down. This first fight against one knight nearly did me in, but thankfully I pulled through and was able to heal and continue looting. I spotted another drone and tried to range attack him, but that barely did any damage. I didn't want to get close, but it looked like I had to. If I could stay above him, I would be fine, but the pressure was on. Somehow, I ended him without taking a hit, and then got the attention of the knight down the way. I needed to figure out a strategy for these guys. First, I pelted him with fireballs, but he was so tanky. Next strat was to try to use my shield, which did protect me and gave me a window to counter. But I used my mana on fireballs, so when I tried to shield again, stabbed in the face. And that ticked me off, and I just wanted the fight to be over, so I went at it. I can tank damage too, you know. At the end of the hall was a ladder and a bunch of pots to break. At the top of the ladder was a door and another treasure chest. And when I opened the door, there was a knight right there. I tried the shield strat, which worked when I saw his attack coming, but that stab move was hard to predict. Ultimately, I ended up just charging in and spam attacking this guy too. On the second level of the gardens, I found a shrine-looking room, which I didn't enter, and more enemies on a bridge. Beside the regular knight was a weirdly floating knight, who promptly disappeared, and then reappeared right next to me and took a swing. So between the swordsman skewering me and the axe guy teleporting all around, this fight was pretty crazy, and I almost immediately had to use a fire essence. I took a moment to compose myself, and tried to make a more strategic approach. I was still focused on the sword knight, but that floating guy was making things very difficult. When I tried to line up an attack, suddenly he'd come swooping in. I was still taking hits left and right, until finally I downed the swordsman. I turned my attention to Captain Annoying, and it was at this point I learned that I should have just targeted this guy first, because one fireball and he was dead. Could have saved myself all that frustration. There was a vessel of souls in the middle of the bridge, and off to one side was a doorway full of greenery. It was locked, but there was a lever that opened the gate. I had a sneaking suspicion this connected back to Stoneheart City, and I was correct. But that's alright, because it gave me an opportunity to save and heal at the fire shrine before I headed back into battle. And now I knew I had direct access to the temple gardens. On the other side of the bridge was what looked like another side entrance, this one to the abandoned path, but there was no lever on this side to open the gate. So I continued forward and got into a scuffle with some leeches and a knight. This was gonna be the one. No damage. Except for that leech. Just total gamer domination. Or not. But it was in this fight that I started honing the parry maneuver, where if you shield just as an enemy attacks, it stuns them, and, I found out later, causes them to take more damage for a short time. But you have to get the timing just right. At the top of the stairs was an ominous-looking door, which I avoided in favor of more exploration, I found this awkward dead-end hallway, which really looked like somewhere to wall jump to a hidden spot, but I just didn't have enough stamina. Then I found a pair of binoculars, which just showed me a bird's eye view of the gardens. And in the corner, I found another room with pots and a ladder. This ladder went up 2 levels, and at the top I faced off against another knight and practiced my parry. That was a game changer when it hit, but I wasn't skilled enough to rely on it full time. Of course, I also wasn't skilled enough to reliably dodge out of the way either. These gardens seem to have a lot of secrets to discover, and I wanted to find as much as I could while I was here. Like this weird hallway that definitely looked like I'm supposed to wall jump my way up. But no. So instead, I made my way down to a new void course, a 2-star level called Julian's Song, and jumped in. This was another red level, and it came with spike wall obstacles. And I learned the painful way that these spikes do damage your health, even if falling into the void doesn't. So apparently it is possible to die in a void level, which I had not considered before. Besides the spikes, this course wasn't too bad, except the platforms were all very narrow, and I kept falling off when trying to charge my spin jump. And, you know, spikes are annoying, but I was platforming pretty well, and I hadn't even fallen yet, despite a few close calls. This course also had a surprising amount of branching paths, where previous void challenges had all been very linear. But that was manageable, and on the plus side, the branching paths rewarded me with void ores. And after a bit more platforming and dodging spikes, I had collected all 30 of the dots, reached the exit without a single fall, and added a 13th heart. Hopefully that wasn't bad luck. Back in the gardens, I was feeling like I had probably missed some things, so I decided to jump down to where I entered and run it again. And I decided to ignore the drone this time, although he still shot me. And then it was time to redeem myself in this fight against the first guard. Perfection! We won't even talk about the repeat fight with the second guard. Yikes. I climbed the ladder again, but instead of opening the door to the second level, I continued climbing higher. This is what I had missed before, a 3rd level. I had to take out a drone with some expert tier juggling. And I took down a floating knight. So much easier. And in a treasure chest I found a dead rat. What? Jumping down this tower, I found another chest with actual treasure in it, and the lever to open up the gate. Then I climbed up the tower again to investigate this door on the 3rd level. Inside was another void course, and a doorway out of the castle, where someone was waiting. But it wasn't an enemy, it was an NPC named Nilo. He was dressed all in green and said he was a forest whisperer. He gave me some lore about how the wide world used to be inhabited, but then the shadow came and destroyed everything. So the spirit gods created blue fire to combat it, and the floating castle as a haven for the survivors. And then, like a true grandpa, to thank me for listening, he gave me a present. The forest tunic was like the merchant's robe. It was a different design entirely, not just a color change. But I wasn't convinced I wanted that, so I went back to my light gray, and dipped out. That void challenge was a 4-star difficulty, but I decided to go for it. Goreboard's Pierce was the name, and it was named appropriately because almost the entire level was spikes. Specifically, spikes that I had to strategically avoid as my moving platform moved through them. So this is what a 4-star difficulty challenge looks like. I had a few close calls, but to my surprise, I made it to the first checkpoint without hitting any spikes. But this course was far from over. Some of it was deceptive, like you didn't have to jump around these spike walls, you just had to stand in the right spot as it passed. And you had to jump on these break-apart cubes to wait for your platform, but it was hard to judge how long it would take. And it was a good thing I had charged up my spin attack. Then the course totally faked me out, because I thought I had to wait for the platform when I was supposed to just go for the checkpoint. And turns out these spikes do reset you without damage, like falling. But I had gotten pretty far for a first try at a 4-star level. And now I knew what was coming. I just had to not do that. I lined it up, made my move, and reached the checkpoint on the next attempt. Which led me to an even harder challenge, where I did have to jump around these walls while not falling behind my ride, and not waiting too long on the break-apart cubes, and not getting too close to the walls, and holy crap, I made it. Oof! Almost clutched it first try. I decided this was just another mind game, that it probably wasn't actually that hard, I just needed to stay calm and not panic. Like right here! And then... lesson learned, charge your spin attack before you start moving. But then... yeah. Second lesson learned, change the camera angle so you can actually see where you're trying to land. Third time was the charm. Plus, I had my spin attack just to be safe. And then I almost blew it again. Holy cow. But instead, I just whiffed the next jump, embarrassingly. It's worth noting that I could save face and simply edit out all these embarrassing moments, and you guys would be none the wiser. But no, I'm choosing to be vulnerable and show the bad, partly because it's entertaining, and partly because it makes the good parts look even better. Like how these walls started moving, but I kept my cool and somehow perfectly navigated this last section of the course. So at least I had a strong finish to my first 4-star level, and that felt good. And I was back to even numbers, as I received heart number 14. And now I was nearly done with everything in the temple gardens. I finally investigated the shrine room, where the water fountain wanted me to cough up $800 just to prove I was trustworthy, which I did, but it just told me a story about being friends with a steam worker and could I please help them remember their old friend. I had no idea what that could mean, so I left that side quest for later. I had to get past this duo again. This time I took out Root Beer Float first thing, and then it was just me and Nightster. And I wish I could say that this fight was peak performance that showed off all I had learned. And it's not that I didn't try, but I'd been playing for a while and I was just getting tired of fighting these guys. So I kept making silly mistakes, like not waiting for the backswing. To be honest, I just wanted to be done. Like, die already. And then it was finally time to check out the mysterious locked door. Cue cutscene, where I'm standing in front of said mysterious locked door. And then everything started shaking, which seems to happen a lot around here, and crap is falling all over the place, and everything is getting dusty, and the bells are gonging. Like, chill, everyone, I didn't even do anything yet. And then it cuts to some dark place where there are monsters of some kind, but it looks like they're sleeping. Apparently the ruckus did not wake them up, which is probably a good thing. Oh crap, never mind. They are awake and they look mad. Did I do that? And then when things finally calm down, this symbol over the door lights up. How ominous. Anyway, I unlocked the door. To be honest, I had forgotten that Uthas gave me the key. Actually, it wasn't until now that I remembered that I had come here to kill the queen. Though that cutscene made me think it was not going to be that simple. But there was only one way to find out. I arrived in the Temple of Gods, which was absolutely covered in shadow goo, and approached a familiar figure in the middle of the room. Cue another cutscene, sure to not explain how Vaughn already got inside without unlocking the door, let alone waking up those monsters. Instead, we got some good exposition. Vaughn reiterated that the queen is now fully corrupted by darkness, and suggested that she felt my presence, hence all the commotion outside. Those monsters, by the way, are the Lords of Shadow, and I had to defeat them before I could reach the queen. And then Vaughn held out his hand and Wingardium Levioso'd me the logo shown on the loading screens that I've been editing out of these videos, and when I touched it, it disintegrated, but apparently that was okay. Vaughn called it the Sanctuary Stone, and said it would give me access to the Lords, and let me teleport between fire shrines. Then it gave me some more pep talk, and disappeared with the end of the cutscene. And so, our noble hero had overcome the challenges of the garden, and prepared himself for the fight ahead.